Welcome friends to this course on understanding absurdist drama. We are in week 3 and this is going to be lecture number 5. Today we'll discuss Beckett's dramaturgy. Although Beckett did not strictly adhere to Christianity, yet his plays are filled with Christian allusions. His plays allude to the theme of suffering, redemption, crucifixion of Christ. These Christian illusions enhance the existential and metaphysical depth of his works. His plays often allude to Christian concepts of original sin, fallen humanity, suffering, redemption, crucifixion of Christ, and so on. For example, many scholars argue that Waiting for Godot is a Christian morality play. The central act of waiting in Waiting for Godot is often interpreted as an allusion to humanity's wait for divine intervention or salvation. The endless waiting mirrors Christian eschatological themes where believers await the second coming of Christ or divine judgment. In the play Vladimir and Estragon, two tramps also refer to crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Like Jesus Christ was crucified along with two thieves, the penitent thief and impenitent thief. Similarly, these two tramps are waiting for Godot and they may allude to the penitent thief and impenitent thief. Beckett's character often endure immense suffering, echoing the Christian narrative of human life as a trial filled with pain and suffering. However, Beckett subverts traditional Christian redemption, presenting suffering as an endless and devoid of ultimate purpose. For instance, in his play Endgame, Ham is awaiting his death. He is bound to his wheelchair and is suffering from paralysis. Ham is constantly looking for painkillers. In Endgame, Ham uncloaks bleak existence parallels Job's endurance of suffering in the Old Testament but without the resolution of divine reward. In the play Waiting for Godot, we also have a bare tree. The tree resembles a cross. All of us know that cross is a Christian symbol. In the next act of the play, there are some leaves which sprout on the tree. Sprouting of these new leaves in the second act refers to the possibility of resurrection. However, one has to understand that Christianity is used in the plays of Beckett only as a symbol. Beckett was not a believer. Therefore, a recurring theme in the plays of Beckett is the absence of God or divine intervention. The absence of God in Beckettian universe parallels the notions of existentialism, where Sartre and others suggest that human beings are living in a world which has been abandoned by God. In Waiting for Godot, Happy Days, and more particularly in Endgame, Beckett suggests that human beings have committed the sin of being born. As Beckett writes in Endgame, you are on earth and there is no cure for it. This sin of being born, of course, alludes to Christian conception of the original sin and the fall of mankind from the Garden of Eden. Samuel Beckett's dramaturgy integrates Christian allusions in ways that both engage with and critique traditional theological narratives. By blending biblical references with existential and absurdist concerns, Beckett presents a universe where the promise of redemption is overshadowed by uncertainty, silence, and the relentless search for meaning in a meaningless world. Beckett's plays are marked by minimalism and the economy of language. His plays are known for their stripped down settings. often featuring barren landscape or confined spaces. For example, the stage is bare in Waiting for Godot. We have one single tree on the stage and that's all. Endgame also takes place in a bunker-like room and there are very few things on the stage. Beckett's plays are also marked by minimum use of language. That's why we don't have Shavian verbosity in the plays of Samuel Beckett. Most of the sentences are either one word long or two words long. Beckett's use of language was a deliberate choice. Beckett understood that words fail to communicate the meaning of human existence and therefore Beckett's reliance on words and the language was minimum. You would remember Lucky's speech from the play Waiting for Godot, where Lucky speaks a nonsensical monologue. There is no logical connection between the words. The entire monologue is just half a sentence. It is chaotic and disorganized. That is a deliberate ploy on the part of Beckett. Beckett's focus in his plays is more on the physicality of the performance. Beckett heavily relies on non-verbal communication and bodily gestures to communicate meaning in his plays. Beckett's stage directions are precise and often minimalist. Beckett meticulously dictates the physical movements and positioning of actors, which contributes to the overall rhythm and atmosphere of his plays. In Waiting for Godot, the tramps Vladimir and Estragon engage in repetitive, almost choreographed routines that reflect their existential stagnation. In Endgame, Ham is confined to a chair while Clove is unable to sit. These constraints symbolize the limitations of human agency and freedom. Beckett often reduces dialogue to a minimum. Therefore, bodies become the primary medium of expression on the stage. Facial expressions, postures, movements become the key to reveal the meaning to the spectators in the theatre. Beckett's emphasis on physicality of performance aligns him with the tradition of physical theatre, where body takes precedence over text in the act of storytelling and performance. Beckett directs this physicality of performance through his use of pantomime. Pantomime is a form of drama in which performers tell a story not with words but with their facial expressions and movements. Beckett uses pantomime as a dramatic device to foreground the limitations of language and the futility of words. His characters often rely on gestures and actions rather than words to express themselves, reflecting his belief in the inadequacy of language to fully capture human experience. Pantomime is Beckett's principal tool to inject physical comedy into otherwise bleak narratives. Beckett's interest in stripping away excess language to focus on the essence of existence aligns with the non-verbal physical storytelling characteristic of pantomime. While not traditional pantomime in the comedic sense, Beckett's works draw on its technique to emphasize the human condition, silence, and the absurd. Act Without Words 1 is primarily a pantomime. In Waiting for Godot as well, pantomime has been properly used. You would remember Estragon struggling with his boots or Vladimir adjusting his hats. And there are other such moments in the play where we find the use of pantomime by Beckett. Pantomime relies on silence and Beckett uses silence as a potential narrative tool. Beckett's use of silence and pauses is revolutionary because Beckett's focus is not only on what is being said but also what is unsaid. The pauses and stillness in his plays, carefully crafted, heighten the tension and evoke emotions, allowing physical performance to fill the void of spoken words. These moments of silence and pause reflect existential emptiness of the human condition. Silence here is not merely the absence of sound. It is a dynamic force that moves the mood of the play. In Waiting for Godot, silences between Vladimir and Estragon's conversation heighten the tension while they are waiting for the arrival of Godot. In Endgame, pauses and silence create a sense of status. In Beckett's hands, silence is not absence. It is presence charged with deeper meanings. Beckett has used silence to communicate the failure of language and communication. His plays highlight the inadequacy of language to convey meaning or foster genuine connection. In his plays, dialogues are often fragmented, repetitive, and nonsensical, reflecting the breakdown of traditional forms of communication. Although Beckett hates the deceptive capacity of language, yet he is aware that words are all that human beings have. Beckett uses non sequiturs in his plays. Non sequitur refers to statements, actions, or dialogues that do not logically follow from the preceding context, creating a sense of disconnection and absurdity. In other words, non sequiturs are illogical conversations where the questioner asks something else and the respondent answers something else. These non sequiturs are disjointed dialogues, a very important feature of almost all major absurdist plays. Non sequiturs have several important functions in the plays. One, they contribute to and produce humor in the play. Because the dialogues are disjointed, they appear funny to the audience. Two, they also mark the limitations of language. In other words, non sequiturs are more than comedic or stylistic choices. They are a profound exploration of the limitations of language, the fragmented nature of human thought, and the absurdity of existence. Plays of Samuel Beckett are also marked by circularity and repetition. You would remember the cyclical structure of Waiting for Godot, wherein Act 2 is just a repeat of Act 1 with minor variations. The two acts mirror each other closely with similar actions, dialogues, and unresolved waiting. Unlike traditional plays of previous playwrights, we don't have a beginning, a middle, or end in these plays. You would also remember that Waiting for Godot begins with the statement of Stragon, nothing to be done, and it also ends with a statement by Stragon. This shows the cyclical structure and circularity of plot in Beckett's plays. In fact, repetition is a structural device used by Beckett the dramatist. Actions are often repeated with minor progress, thereby giving some sense of illusion of progress to the spectator, although nothing greatly has changed. These techniques of circularity and repetition reinforce the idea of status, monotony, and boredom of human existence. Beckett also introduced several innovations into his stagecraft. In Happy Days, Winnie is buried up to her waist initially and later up to her neck. This symbolizes her gradual entrapment and decay. In play, characters are confined in large urns, speaking only when illuminated by a spotlight, emphasizing their lack of agency. For Beckett, stage itself is a symbol. Whatever happens on the stage has deeper, profounder symbolical meaning. Therefore, Beckett has challenged the traditional boundaries of stagecraft. Beckett employs dark humor in his plays. The comedy arises from tragic circumstances such as characters' futile attempts to find meaning or escape their situations. In fact, Beckett's work epitomizes tragicomedy, which blends both tragic and comic. But Beckett's tragicomedy is very different from that of Shakespeare. While in Shakespeare, tragic and the comic, they remain separate, although integral in the overall structure of the play. It does not happen in the similar fashion in Beckett's plays. Beckett's tragedy originates from the human condition of despair, but the way Beckett looks at it makes it comic. Beckett juxtaposes existential despair with comedic elements, allowing the audience to laugh even in the face of hopelessness. For example, in the play Waiting for Godot, Vladimir and Estragon are thinking of suicide, but as audience we laugh at their desire for death. Suicide is something very serious, yet we are laughing. Beckett incorporates elements of vaudeville and slapstick comedy such as physical humor, exaggerated gestures and routines. These elements lighten the bleakness of existential despair. For example, in Waiting for Godot, Vladimir and Estragon swap their hats on the stage. That is very comic. The way they look at Lucky, or the way they discuss carrot and turnip in the play, all that appears to be comic and funny, although we are aware that there is an underlying tragic tone pervasive throughout the play. Beckett's tragicomedy is steeped in irony, where humorous situations often underscore deeper truths. Characters laugh at their predicament, yet their laughter reveals an awareness of their hopelessness. Beckett's characters are trapped in repetitive cycles. Their lives are devoid of clear meaning or purpose. This is both tragic and comedic, reflecting the absurdity of human condition. That's all for today, friends. We'll meet next week. Thank you so much.